to go ahead and get started. I don't see people, or there may be a few stragglers, and they'll catch up. Thank you very much for coming this morning and for staying or coming back. We really appreciate this. I think it's best appropriate if we start with a word of prayer. Pastor Heidi, you're going to do that. What happened to the hand?
It's back in the corner now.
Thank you for noticing. I think that was my job.
All right, let's pray. Good and gracious God, we are so blessed here at Grace. You have blessed us in so many ways. 50 years of ministry, so many projects, and you've laid another challenge before us, and in a blessing. We are so grateful to be here today, to consider what could be some very exciting things for our church, and there's been a lot of work that's led up to this, God, and you have been guiding us, and we thank you for being with us. Send your spirit into our hearts, guide us, bless us, and help us to do your will and your work so that we can spread the good news of the love of Jesus throughout our community. Amen.
Thank you. Let's set it right down. So this truly today is an informational meeting, and there's a couple of segments. We're going to start a brief review of the process. How did we get here? And then we'll be introducing our architects, and they'll do the actual presentation of the project, what their process was, what we come up with along with the costs, and then we will do a brief financial presentation with Pastor Paul and I, just kind of understanding the thoughts behind that, and a little more details as we get to that part. And then we're going to do a question and answer session at the end. If you do need to ask a question during the question and answer session, we're going to ask you to please use the microphone. As you know, we have a video in the back. We are videoing this presentation, and it will be on the website along with the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, as soon as we can. For those, there's a number of members who couldn't be here today and wanted the information. So as soon as we can get it up, John Byrne and Carl Harms are going to work in getting that up there. So that's fabulous. So this information, you can review it as many times as you'd like. And if I fall in my face, it'll be on YouTube forever. Great. So really, I was asked to share a little bit about the introduction of the project. This is something that started at least in 2006 with the SWAMP team, the SWAMP analysis that was presented. And one of the things that came up was building. And what do we do and how do we do it? And at that time, out of that, we've done just about everything else on there. We've changed some programs, we've changed some music, we've called most notably a second pastor. Those were all things that came out of the SWAMP report. The one thing we didn't do is we really didn't do any additions or renovations, with the exception of some office space when Pastor Heidi came, so we had space for that. And then we also had the facilities planning team that was around about that time that Pastor Heidi was called, and they looked at the facilities and how could we make the facilities we had then work for what we needed. If you remember what is now Pastor Heidi and Aim Ruth's office, and part of that office used to be the youth room. And what used to be the youth room was a hallway and part of Pastor Heidi's office, Aim Ruth's office. So there was some configuration there, and they came up with some recommendations. And then over the years, Vision Planning has done some things with the remodeling of the fellowship hall several years ago. And then in 2011, the Vision Planning team, which was still relatively new at that time, really was given the task of what are we doing, what should we be doing? Remember, we did a congregational survey. We spent a lot of time reviewing that. And space became an issue. Space was the issue. Not so much the worship space, but what do we do during the week? What do we do on Sunday mornings with Sunday school? On many Monday evenings especially, and in Wednesday nights, every room is used. There's not room for things. And so Vision Planning worked with many different groups within the organization, and we voted as a congregation. We hired a consultant, a foundation architect to come in and work with us to come up with a master plan. And with that, we used that for the base to start our Growing Grace fundraising campaign, capital campaign, and raised almost $1 million. The building committee was formed. They spent the time, they've been working. They decided as a congregation, approved to hire Growth Architect, Growth Design out of Cedarburg. And what they have done, as you'll see, is not new. While the design that you see today is not the same design that was presented with the space planning, it's reconfigured, things have been moved around as we've learned more about the facilities. There isn't anything in it that wasn't as part of, brought up as either the congregational survey or phase 1 or phase 2 of the vision planning team and what we came up with that master plan. So that's really important to remember that this isn't new, this isn't a surprise. While some of the rooms might be moved around differently than they had been, really all of the main points that came up back from the survey, back from the SWAMP team, back from the vision planning process to the master plan are all part of this plan today, and I think they really addressed them along with a lot of surprises as you'll see that have come up. So that's kind of the history and how we got that. With that, I'm going to call up Paul from Growth Design, and he can introduce himself and a little bit about the company, and then go from there. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's nice to be here. I travel all over the country for a job. It is nice to have a project close to home. I'm a member at your partner church, All Peoples, in Milwaukee. It's nice to hear that they are in your thoughts and prayers and that we are active partners together in the ministry in this area of Wisconsin. I always like to start with your mission statement. In any presentation, we welcome all people, proclaim God's saving grace, and equip believers to be servants of Jesus Christ. This is really the litmus test for the success of anything that your congregation undertakes in the way of architecture. Everything needs to be held up against your mission as people of God. A little bit more about process, just so you understand when we came on board, what we've done and where we have been. So the starting point was a conceptual study, as John mentioned, which was concluded in November of 2012 and estimated somewhere around $1.5 million to $2 million was the expected cost of the project. Of course, that is now 2.5 years ago. We took that master plan, we reviewed it, we refined it, and we have updated it. And we did that through work with the planning team and by talking with ministry leaders about the spaces that were in that original plan. And then we did some evaluation and refinement based on the current understanding of the building code, and then updated and further refined that with the planning team. Your church then brought Callis Construction on board as a construction manager. Adam Arndt from Callis Construction is here to represent them and to answer questions regarding budget and cost, if there are any. We evaluated the probable cost. We priced upgrades to HVAC and deferred maintenance items, which were not originally part of that original budget. We updated the plans and further refined the scope based on cost. And we also have been working, your congregations are working with the Mission Investment Fund of the ELCA to understand potential lending and financing for the project. And that brings us to today with presentation first to the council and now to the congregation, and ultimately you will vote on how to proceed. I don't know where that came from, but it's not a bad slide. Well, I think we've merged a song into the presentation. I'll save you and will not sing. So, you have developed, and this comes back from that original study, some program priorities. And all of these, again, have to be seen in context with your mission statement, welcome, proclaim, equip. Hospitality space was one of the top priorities to address. Children's and educational programming, providing more spaces for a growing program for children and family ministries, as well as provisions to allow parenting and family activities to happen in greater and easier fashion. Improvements to food service ministries. If I understand it correctly, I haven't been to your congregation for a meal, but if I understand, there is a fairly circuitous route to get people through serving and cooking. And I have been through your kitchen, and it is in need of upgrades. Providing meeting space. And finally, addressing service areas and building systems. Your building systems here at Grace are relatively old and do not serve all of the spaces in your building as well as they should or could. And finally, then looking at maintenance as well. So being good stewards for the building, both in upkeep and into the future. There are also some design sensibilities that the committee and our firm has kept in mind as we've proceeded to design. The first is presence. And by that, what we mean is you have a site that has the potential to be very connected to Grafton. If the building reaches out and captures the imaginations and the curiosity of people passing by, providing as a part of that invitation into your building and making it easy and convenient to get in the building. As a part of that, providing a clear pathway through the building. One of the things I experienced when I worked with churches is that you all know how to get places. You all know how to go around your building and get to the various ministries and how to do the things. It's kind of like going to communion, right? You all know how to do it, but you need instruction for visitors at the start. So making the pathways through the building much easier. And then providing inspiring aesthetics. So in other words, all the way through, creating spaces that are not only functional but allow inspiration. And finally, building security, safety, and control. There's one thing I've seen more in the last 20 years of doing church design. This is the one that has become the most critical. We live in a different world than we lived in when this building was first built. So with that, I want to walk you through. I'm going to do this fairly quickly for time's sake. We do have handouts when we get to the point of questions that will have all of this stuff on it, and there are boards that I brought today that can be on display in your church over the next week and the next few months. So this is the overall master plan. I'll go kind of place section by section to explain. This is the overall layout. There are essentially two areas of addition. The first, the largest one here, the smaller one over here. The red lines indicate the start and stop of the existing building. We have been dealing with code issues. I'll speak a little bit more about this later, whether we sprinkle the whole building or whether we separate additions. Both are possible. So, hospitality, your gathering space in this layout, this lighter colored area right in here, is 1,800 square feet. The rule of thumb for worship is that the gathering space should be a third to a half the size of the worship space. For the existing worship, we're right at a half. with this new area. And for future worship, should you choose to expand as it was identified in that conceptual study, it would be right around a third. So it's within that range of what you need to function. Essentially, the original plan provided a raised area over the existing lobby. When we looked at the plan, based on our experience with churches, it was clear that that space in there was always going to be congested, and raising the ceiling in that space, while that might make it feel a little more accommodating, it wasn't going to really provide hospitality space as you need it. So we essentially created a larger space, and in doing so pushed the offices out of the existing building farther to the west, and created at the end of that a better place for entry closer to the bulk of your parking. So you really will have two major entry points, both of them into circulation areas, and then into a raised roof area over what is essentially, if you think beyond the accordion partition here, all the way to the end of the building. That will be the new gathering space. Served by a hospitality counter, hospitality storage, a fairly significant coat area just off of that second entry. Farther to the west, since we have pushed the offices out of their existing place, the addition to the west on the east side, the addition to the south, on the east side of the building, has reception and offices in their own suite, as well as a connection to teacher resource, 2 conference areas, and a place for your literacy ministries. All new office spaces, nicely combined, able to overlook parking and keep surveillance on who's coming to and entering the building on weekends and during the week. Farther to the west in that addition, a new large group area for educational ministries. Moving those programs into this new larger space allows for the existing classroom area to now be dedicated to both youth, high school programming, and junior high programming. The existing classrooms that serve your younger ages will continue to serve those age groups. In the center of the space, in the heart of the building then, the existing youth room will be turned into a music meeting room, so a practice area, a place for storage for music, perhaps occasionally meeting spaces during the week. And since the hospitality serving area is right in the heart of where your nursery is right now, a new nursery room in the existing kitchen, larger in size, with a separate storage area, and then access into a changing room and a single use, what we call a family toilet. It's a private toilet that can be used for custodial care of anybody that needs assistance in using a restroom. These areas, the changing room and the family toilet, while they're accessible to the nursery, probably through something like a Dutch door, also have good access into the main corridor that leads up to your fellowship. So anybody, parents that are not connected with the nursery programming on a particular Sunday, people in wheelchairs, people that have custodial care of someone in their family, can also get in and use these spaces without disrupting the nursery. So it's just a little bit larger arrangement of that. Finally, fellowship and dining. This was a pretty significant change to the master plan. The original master plan had renovation of the existing kitchen, and then with the second phase of the master plan, providing a new fellowship and kitchen in a future building expansion somewhere down the road. We looked at that and raised the question of why would you improve the kitchen in its current location, which would not allow for better serving, service line through the building or through the kitchen area on the way to fellowship? Why would you do all that work, not get the full result that you need, and then in 5, 10, 12, 15 years, turn around and undo all that to build a new kitchen later on? So, along with the planning team, we decided it was worthy of consideration to provide a new kitchen at this time that would serve the needs of the congregation for the long term of the fellowship functions of the building. Kitchen of adequate size with its own serving lines connected to the existing fellowship hall, and then in the future, when fellowship is built, that space would stay intact and serve that new fellowship space. While it costs more money up front, the benefit is you don't invest money in the kitchen now only to dismantle and rebuild it later. All of the plumbing can be set up in the right location. All of the utilities can be designed for that future kitchen, or for the future fellowship hall needs in that kitchen now. Finally, with worship, very little change here, but there are a few changes. Number one, we do plan to insulate the door over here so that there's less transmission of sound through the door. And we intend to also repair the roofing over the choir. The choirs have lots of things that are kind of sensitive to water. The rest of us can get wet. The musicians, not so much. There are also service areas that some of which were designed into the plans. So the areas in red are actually toilet rooms, and the two largest changes to the original master plan is this family changing area off of the nursery. The other change is the utility room, which can serve for cleanup and for children's cleanup for art projects, and also potentially serve the Family Promise program as if and when that project moves into your facility. The original master plan in this area of the building provided 2 single-use toilets for the educational programming in the building. We looked at that and said that's not enough. Children, you have a lot of children. Children take a little more time in toilet rooms, so we expanded the toilet rooms in the central part of the building, making them convenient to the educational ministries. The items in purple are mechanical spaces. Some of those are existing. Some of them are reconfigured with reconfigured mechanicals and upgraded mechanical spaces. This one up here is new. The mechanicals have not yet fully been designed, so this may push and pull a little bit as we move through the plan, but this is the basic game plan. So this is the plan layout. I want to say a little bit about air conditioning. All of the new spaces will be fully vented and air conditioning, compliant with the code and for the convenience of the programming. Renovated spaces in the building, or significantly renovated spaces in the building, will also be air conditioned fully. That's primarily gathering and lobby spaces. Existing spaces that now have ventilation, although inadequate, or have cooling, those will be continued and modified to upgrade them so that they are more sufficient. So a little bit of explanation with the worship space. The recommendation from the engineer was not to change and upgrade the condensers that are currently connected with your worship. They are serviced from time to time and they are capable of providing service for the building into the medium range. The thought is, if we change them out now, when the worship is later rebuilt, they may not have had to be replaced. It all depends on the timing for that. So the thought is to continue to repair and maintain them in the event that they go out and to provide new condensing for the worship space. And then finally, for the remainder of these larger spaces, upgrading new ventilation for those spaces with the capability of doing cooling. The only spaces in the building that will not be air conditioned to a large extent are the preschool classrooms. We'll see where that goes. Sometimes for a little bit of extra cost, you can gain a little bit of comfort in those areas as well. So, again, the overall proposed plan. Site layout, this is how the two additions look on your site. The addition to the south and west stays within, outside of 117 feet south and 44 feet to the west. We're essentially lining these additions up with the edge of your existing building. The existing parking lot may be restriped, it basically stays the same as it currently is. The existing main entry and the existing entry to the west stay as they currently are. The exception, there is a little bit of a change, and that will provide direct loading and the capacity to direct load directly into the kitchen from the west entry. As I mentioned, a new main entry to the east. This entry has a pathway with steps from the parking area, so it could function as an entry for your literacy program, as well as exit. And then we have exit out of the large classroom area and another exit out of the corridor between the youth program and the educational ministries program area. There's also another image of the site. The existing catch basin stays. We do have to berm up against the building because of the way the site slopes off as you go to the south. The municipality has asked that we enclose the existing dumpsters on the site, and we are also providing bike racks as a part of sustainability practice. This is also something that the city requires, but it's a good idea too. Images. This is what the exterior, looking toward the building, you can see the edge of the existing canopy. Essentially, when we did the expansion of the gathering space to push it further to the south, one of the advantages of that is it gave us the opportunity of creating a much more visible and welcoming facade to the building. So the first master plan, raising the roof over the lobby area, succeeded in bringing in natural light into the hospitality space. However, that addition essentially took that portion of vertical expansion and hid it, and it was hidden behind the canopy. As the hospitality space moved farther to the south, it gave us the potential of recreating a more inviting welcome in between the hospitality and the office, as well as allowing that higher, more present building to not only fill the interior space with light through the glass, but also to allow the activity inside the hospitality to be on full display for the surrounding neighborhood as people drive by. What that means for invitation and hospitality is really critical for growth and the welcoming of visitors. On the inside, this is looking from the existing entry right here. This is the edge of the entry lobby, looking into the hospitality space all the way across. The offices are back here in the background, serving hospitality counter. You may have noticed in the plan, fireplace on the far southeast corner of that space, and you can start to see how that space opens up as you move beyond the lower ceiling here of the entry lobby. Looking from the opposite direction, as you enter on that more southern main entry, the large expanse of the gathering space, these are the doors to worship, the serving counter off to the left, and you can see the corner of the fireplace part on the right. Another image looking from the hospitality counter toward the fireplace. Again, we have light filling clerestory windows higher up, and then a fairly significant bank of windows looking out toward the parking and the street as a way of calling people into the building, and also reminding you that beyond worship and fellowship, you have a field of mission in the outside world. And finally, from the fireplace area, looking back at the hospitality counter. Probably a good time to make mention, we are not yet at the point of selecting colors. I selected all these. I can't guarantee that that's where the committee will go. So that's a further refinement in the process, picking out both texture and color for all of the new spaces and renovated areas. A little bit on building data. This is really very, very basic and hard to read. New additions are about 8,000 square feet. Renovations in the existing building, at least substantial renovations in the existing building, are also about 8,000 square feet. So we're modifying or adding about 16,000 square feet of building here for better ministry. Project cost. Big. All the pricing that I show you covers the entire proposed plan, the way it's shown. The costs include hard construction costs. Those are the things that are the actual brick and mortar of the building. They include architectural and engineering and consulting fees that are required for the project. They include contingency monies, which are monies that are set aside so that in the event that there are unforeseeable circumstances or things that need to be modified during the course of construction, there are monies available so the planning team or the building committee do not have to come back to the congregation asking for more money. We have owner soft costs, which are, so the hard costs are the physical construction, the soft costs are all those other things that have to go into the project but aren't tangible things at the end. For instance, printing of plans or legal fees connected with the construction. So we call them soft costs. And then we do have allowances for furnishings and equipment that can be used then to help furnish the new space. Most significantly, we do have an allowance for kitchen equipment for that new kitchen. I want to make mention, as I mentioned before, you do have a construction manager who's on board, and all of the pricing and the estimating has been done up front by Catalyst Construction, by Adam and Matt at Catalyst Construction. They've done an excellent job and have been doing great service for your congregation, making our jobs as architects and designers that much easier. So with that being said, breaking these down by hard construction and soft construction costs. So the site work is about $83,000. The building addition, that office and education area to the south, is about $1 million. The building addition that has the new kitchen is about $185,000. I've rounded all these numbers just so it's a lot simpler to see. Existing building renovations, like 8,000 square feet of existing renovation in the building is $720,000. That number does include deferred maintenance items, I'll get to that in a minute, that are needed to upgrade things in the building, so you don't finish the project and then in 2 years have to turn around and replace the mechanical unit. HVAC repairs, replacements, and upgrades. Also a part of that deferred maintenance. We estimate that that'll be $150,000. Construction requirements and fees, about $50,000. That seems like a low number, but part of the reason it's that low is there is a credit in there for direct purchase tax savings because you're a nonprofit entity. You can purchase hard construction items, materials directly and avoid paying tax on those. It does include construction insurance and a construction fee. This is all the cost of the building. Soft costs, owner soft costs for architects, engineers, consultants, contingency monies, and FF&E and kitchen equipment allowance, we're estimated at about $350,000. And all of that leads us to a total project cost for that entire area of $2.6 million. Now I said I would talk a little bit about deferred maintenance items and other costs that we've broken out. All of that's included. There is one item that's not in the work previously shown, and that is expanding sprinkler, which has been estimated to be somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000. Here's why I need to mention this. Our firm has been doing a little bit of a dance with the state of Wisconsin on the renovation of your building, particularly the gathering space, and whether that is new construction or remodeling, because it's so extensive. If they deem that it is remodeling, we can put up the firewalls that separate the additions and not have to sprinkle any of the existing building. If they rule that it is new construction because of the extent of the work, then separating the building is much more difficult. And in fact, for a balance of $50,000 to $60,000, we can take down the firewalls, have no barriers inside the building, sprinkle everything. There are benefits both ways. And the reason I mention this is we've had two rulings from the state of Wisconsin. One that says that the remodeling is an addition, and one that says that it isn't. We're still trying to sort out which is which, and it takes a little time to do that. So we felt it was better to present this cost and explain. This cost might need to be in here. We may not have a choice. The benefits are, you sprinkle the building. Later on, when you build the new worship and fellowship, you'll have to do all of it anyway. So doing it now has some longer-term benefit. So informational items, everything I'm showing you here is included in the previous costs presented. So they're deferred maintenance items, replacement of existing flat roof and core insulation that is currently on the roof. Upgrades for the water service, upgrades to emergency lighting in the building, upgrades to the fire alarm system, upgrades to the electrical service, and improvements in power and lighting in the existing building. All of these things to the tune of about $275,000 are things that are improvements to the existing building, not necessarily just renovated spaces, but things that will benefit your functioning of the building in the future. HVAC repairs, replacement, and upgrades for $150,000. I mentioned that earlier. As a part of this renovation, We want to bring as much as we can for your existing building systems up to better function and a longer lifespan and perhaps even greater efficiency. Usually that's the case. And the reason for that is because if you embark on a building program of this size, you probably will not want to go through a major capital campaign for some years. So we felt it was better off taking care of all the building systems so that once this building is undertaken and these costs are undertaken as well, we would now be able to focus future monies that are raised in the congregation of ministries rather than building for some time. And then the new serving kitchen, just to put that number out there, the addition along with an allowance for the kitchen equipment. Our expectation is that some things will be borrowed out of the existing, some things will be new in that relocated kitchen. And finally, the rebuilt hospitality space, one of the largest components of the renovation budget, is about $500,000. It's a pretty substantial renovation, but ends up with a space that is far more useful. So I'm going to turn it back over to John, who's going to say a little bit about the approach to finance.
And Paul. So, you know, it's a lot of money. I think as I said, it's a lot. Am I on? All right. It's a lot of money. We know that. And as the building committee kept going through things and as they kept updating council, there was lots of debriefing and lots of prayers and what have we got ourselves into. You know, and you can see the number, a lot of it's, whether you call it deferred maintenance or upgrades and things like that, and you can kind of see as that last slide how the price got to where it is, considerably more. We went ahead and we're working with the Mission Investment Fund of the ELCA. It is a ministry of the ELCA. We are actually investors in that through our endowment fund. And what that does is that money, people invest that money and the interest is paid to them, and that money goes to expand the mission of the church. Through building new churches, renovating churches, that's what they do. They are the specialists in how to help churches renovate. We went with them for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it's a service of the church. They're experts at it, and it's their goal to make sure that we can repay it and continue this ministry in the long run. Their goal is to grow the church, not collect money from us if we default or something like that would happen. So it's a great, and they're experts at it. As of Thursday, late afternoon, we have been approved for a $2.125 million loan. The Mission Investment Fund feels very confident with where we're at and with our giving records, and they've given a ton of information. And Ed Borkenhagen, I don't see him today, but he put a lot of work together as well as Janice Leckie and I putting this together. So they feel very confident in that as well. And we have about $1 million in pledges. So because of the timing of this, we would probably borrow more than, you know, if it's 2.6 and we have $1 million that says we need to borrow 1.6, we would probably borrow a little bit additional, because as that money's coming in to through the capital campaign, it's a timing issue more than anything. Right now, we have some rough estimates of, Paul, if you want to talk about that, of what that means to our ministry plan. We should have this week, that's the goal, we have Romy McCarthy and some others will be helping, running through some computer programs. How does this mean and what this truthfully means with paying off interest and not, and paying off the existing loan and all of that. She has access through her job to the big, powerful computers that understand that. So, way beyond my finance background. So, but Paul, you have some initial thoughts on this as well.
And again, I share with John, there's a bit of sticker shock here when we were going through the whole process. We were talking 1.5 to 2 million. It's come out to be more, but I think any of us who've done home projects know that happened. 6 years ago, we had a leaky shower faucet in our bathroom, and $11,000 later, we had a new bathroom. So things like that happen. But again, the leaders of your church have done an excellent job in looking at everything. They have been really good stewards of your time and your money. And as John said, we don't have all the dollars and cents because this is a work still in progress, but we can share with you the basic thoughts of how we will afford this. Okay, which we believe we can. It's a good sign. The Mission Investment Fund is very confident that we can do this. We can do this. Again, we have pledges of almost $1 million to our Growing Grace campaign that runs through 2017. One of our plans is that we will conduct a second appeal, which we talked with you about last year. Most congregations have done this. My former congregation did 2 building programs, and both times we ran a capital fund appeal and we ran a debt reduction appeal, which would be in 2017. Those appeals normally yield, I talked to Jeff Newland from RSI, who conducted our campaign last year. He said those appeals normally will yield about 70% of what you get from your initial campaign. So if we as a congregation, we can expect probably $600,000 to $700,000 that we as a congregation, just where we are right now, we could probably expect that that would be there. And then we would be funding this through our mortgage. Now, if you're not aware, we have a very small mortgage here at Grace. Our mortgage, I believe it's in the area of $80,000 or so. Our congregational mortgage payments are less than a lot of us pay for our houses. Okay? Obviously, our mortgage will go up, and we as a congregation haven't had a big mortgage for a long time, so this may be a shock. Our best estimate at this point is that probably this will mean a $50,000 annual increase in our church mortgage, which is about a 10% increase in our annual giving, and that money comes from us. But again, there's some other positive things that we're all thinking, I can't give any more right now. There's some positive things for us to think about. One is this, that when people give to capital fund appeals, and I've already had 2 members share this with me, they say, you know what, I've learned I can give more. I'm okay doing this. In my former congregation, we found that out. We went from a congregation that was constantly running deficits to a congregation where people learned I can give more. And they continued after the end of the appeals to give at a higher level, which in my former congregation was a wonderful way of helping us to finance it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Another thing is to keep in mind is a program like this brings growth. Again, I talked to Jeff Newland from RSI, who conducted our appeal last year, and he said a congregation can typically expect 10% growth as a result of a major building program. And a 10% growth in your membership will also increase, can't guarantee the 10% growth in your giving, but that will be part of it as well. And so, you know, I feel that we as a congregation, as we continue to grow, this will be a very positive thing for us. I mean, it's not like we're pouring the money down a hole with nothing to show. We will have a wonderful new building that will build a lot of enthusiasm and enable us to do a lot more ministry here at Grace. That those are very positive things to keep in mind. One other thing for us to keep in mind, if you're going, I don't think this will work for us, is it will. St. Luke Lutheran in Slinger is doing a program that's spending $1.9 million, which is about 3/4 of what we're spending. Their capital fund appeal raised about 3/4 of what we raised. So if you rate them up, they're doing about the same thing that we are for the money they raised, and they're making it. They said first year or two is difficult because you have a lot more giving, but they said we're going to be fine. So if you're sweating buckets right now thinking, that's a lot of money, it is a lot of money. But with God's grace and God's leadership, and we trusting in the leadership of the Lord, and in our own generosity. I mean, think about this. We, as a congregation, have pledged $1 million. That's a lot of money, and that's wonderful. And so, as one of your pastors, having been through this twice before, I believe we can do this. And I think it will be a very good thing for us to do. I truly do. And I do want to say one more thing. I know we had a number of folks who didn't give to the Growing Grace campaign, which was perfectly, that was their right to do so. Because they didn't think we needed the space or things like that. But I hope we all understand from what was shared here that even if we do not lay one additional brick in this building, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars just in repairs that we need to do. And I think much better to build this wonderful new facility, take care of all those repairs, which we have to do anyway, and have this facility which will enable us as a congregation to better serve our needs, but will also, as you saw, the place for Family Promise, for the Literacy Center, will make Grace a better neighbor for our community and enable us to serve this community as well. So again, those are some of the preliminary numbers. We don't have everything nailed down. We'll have a lot more information for you, obviously, before you vote. We want everyone to know what we're thinking of, how we plan to go about it, and with God's grace, we will continue to grow in grace, and we will really move forward in wonderful ways in the Lord. Thank you.
Paul, I think you want to respond?
So I started with your mission statement.
No, here? Yeah, there we go. I want to end with this piece from your website. The building is not really who we are. Grace is about people who are caring, supportive, and always looking for opportunities to serve our loving God. The people of Grace are the hands of God in the world today. It may seem strange for an architect to say it's not about the building. The building is important, but it is about the people here. And your people and your ministries do need a place out of which to work, the same as the spirit of the person needs a body to do work in the world. So please keep in mind, the building is important, but ultimately, what you do with this project is about your ministries. Reaching new people, strengthening yourselves as the faithful in Grafton, and celebrating the love that we all have in God. So with that,
All right, thanks, Paul. So right now, we're starting to pass out copies of the plans. So I first want to thank Paul and the architectural and the design team. Are the members of the building committee, can you stand up who are here? So besides Carrie and Kieran, who are passing out, I want to let you know the amount of work and meetings the building committee has put together. And no matter what happens, I want to thank them for their time today. Amazing amount of time and dedication and thought. And Janet Slecki, who couldn't be here, she's with her mother today in Iowa, has also been a huge part of that. I want to say, as we're passing these up, before I open up for discussion, the next week meeting after the Palm Sunday brunch, I have been asked to say, if you are planning on coming to the Palm Sunday brunch, the more the better. But please, please, please sign up on your way out so that we know how much food to prepare. Okay? It's challenging enough to prepare a lot of breakfast in our kitchen, much less if we don't know how many people are there. So we're going to do a discussion today. We're going to ask, I'm going to moderate it between Paul and Adam and the building committee members. Also, on your way out, if you are interested, on the end of each bell table in the back are some green sheets of paper that you have some questions that you want to ask, but not at this meeting. Please feel free to write them down, and by Wednesday, get those to the church office, and we'll have answers to those specific questions at next Sunday's meetings. My email, my work email is also on that. If you have a question, please, please, please let me know. I've only heard in the last 2 weeks, or since we've announced the meeting, I have actually only heard from one member of the congregation. And I truly appreciate when I have the ability to ask the questions so that we know where everybody's feeling. So please, don't feel free to do that and call me. My number is on the Grace website as well. So please, any of the building committee, the pastors, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So with that, I'm going to turn on the microphone, and we're going to ask whoever asks, please use the microphone, because we are recording this. So even if you think you have a loud, big mouth, we need you to use the microphone. Yes. Hold it close. It's old.
I just have a question about security in the building. It's something you had mentioned, but then didn't discuss when you were talking about the plans. And then also with that, I know we were talking about doing a shelter rotating between the churches, and I know that was in the original plans, and I don't see that on these current plans. So I'm just wondering if you could touch base on those two topics.
Great.
So security, right now, from the standpoint of security, the greatest increase in security is having entries that are capable of being seen by the office. That doesn't mean that we can't include security system. It's pretty standard right now in churches to have some kind of a lockable buzzer type system where the office can buzz people in if somebody calls, and the office then can see who's actually at the door and then let them in if the church is locked. The second question was about
The family promise room.
oh, sure. So one of the provisions that we've done is by including larger toilet rooms in the utility room in the heart of the building. And then I've worked with, I think, 5 or 6 churches now that have Family Promise programming. We do have some storage space for Family Promise in the design. If I understand correctly, many of the things that are used with that program are brought into the building by Family Promise. But some things do have to stay here. So we do have storage specifically for Family Promise. And then, of course, they typically use classrooms or large areas that are able to be broken down into smaller spaces, and the flexibility of some of the educational areas will allow for Family Promise to function in those areas.
Question right down here.
I have a question about the sanctuary. Early, back when we were discussing all of this building, one of the subjects that came up was that we need more space for worship. That came up. There was even a rather humorous discussion about how the number of seats are counted because of the size
Bigger
of
box
the
now,
box.
yeah, right, exactly.
But anyway, now we're saying there's absolutely none of that in this plan. Are we just kicking the can down the road a short distance?
Sure, I can answer that. So the original plan that was presented had, always had worship as phase 2. That plan had worship, fellowship in the kitchen as a phase 2 of the design. If we get too crowded, which is a wonderful thing, the easiest or temporary fix, maybe it's not easiest if you're one of the 2 pastors or the organist, but the easiest fix is you can add a 3rd service every Sunday. So, that's harder to do with 2 Sunday schools a day, but we could do that. So yeah, and everything on this design has been done that, yeah, we could do this. But it was never and I don't have it in front of me, but when we did present that, we talked about the potential growth that we had, that we were good for probably another 10 years of growth. Now, if we truly grew 10% from this, yeah, then we're gonna have to look at probably 3 services on a Sunday, and what that might mean, and that's something certainly the worship committee has been talking about, council's talked about, and pastors have talked about as a knowledge of something that may happen. Answer your question? Okay, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
And he sort of touched on where I was going. Are we thinking ahead with these designs to where if we did have to expand, I assume we maybe try to utilize what we have here. I don't know how much we can go that way as far as easements or as far as the trees. It looks like we could expand the existing fellowship to the north of the kitchen if we had to. I saw a picture up there for that possible expansion. Does that mean we could expand the worship maybe
Yes.
into the existing fellowship?
Well,
that way?
whatever, I think the decision at the master plan was, this building the worship center as it stays would have to go. There's just no way of adding space to this. It's an unusual design, but I like it, but it's not additional. So yeah, we go that way, correct?
Right, the original master plan left the right amount of room for both the fellowship expansion and the worship expansion. The way that we've done the kitchen now in the short term will push the fellowship hall a little bit farther out. The other thing that I've done in our planning is assume that the fellowship hall space would be larger than that original master plan. Primarily because the original master plan added 100 square feet to the size of the existing fellowship hall and completely rebuilt it. My thinking is If you're gonna build it bigger, build it better, make it more useful at that time. Now, if you have to squeeze it back down, it's good.
And, you know, one of the thoughts when the vision planning team at least put the master plan together is we were very cognizant that we are a family-friendly, neighborhood-based church. We're never going to be a mega church. You know, this is never going to be Grafton Brook and have stadium seating. That's just not who we are as a congregation. And so, yes, we would probably go bigger, but there would definitely be limits that it would still be a relatively nice size space. Question, that's all.
Thanks. Can you speak a little bit to timelines, when the general contractor will be bid out, when the project will break ground, when it will be done?
Yes. All right.
Sure, so I can start that conversation. I'll let Adam say a little bit more about that as well. The hope is, if we get approval to go ahead at this time, that we can be in the ground in late summer, and 7 months, 8 months, something like that for construction. Some of that will depend on how it's sequenced. In the planning, most churches just can't shut down completely, all of the renovations. So we still have to go through, I mean, one of the first steps is knowing actually what you approve. And then the second step is really strategizing. When we are able to get in the ground, what sorts of things we can do with the least amount of impact, the functioning of the congregation for fall and winter of 2015 and 16. So it's a little bit right now of first knowing the scope and the scale, but for the most part, we're planning on August start and completion within 7 or 8 months of that.
That is part of one of the questions. It's probably a good time for me to address that because I have been asked that question. Was the timing of these meetings? You know, it's pretty quick, and we're going this pretty fast. And you know, we don't have all the finance information exactly pulled together and some of that. Some of it's based because we live in the beautiful state of Wisconsin and we have this thing that God never called winter. Well, we've been told that we have to be in the ground by August, we're pretty much, we might as well say forget it until next March, or when the ground is thawed. So, you know, we need August, September, October, maybe November to get the, you know, foundations and all that site work done, the foundations, and get the building enclosed before we can move forward. So that's some of it with the timing. It's the reality of it, so I think it's important. Karen?
I just had a couple questions real quick on the security. Is that a glass wall then between the office and the reception so they can easily see? And then also, is there some guarantee, or there's no guarantee, but the deferred account, is that for sure going to be held in deferment and we're not going to become complacent later and say, well, the furnace is working good, let's put the money somewhere else?
Okay, so the first question, you may recall in the earlier photo, this is the line of existing and new.
Right.
We do have openings in the office that allow for visibility to the north. The challenge is that's a firewall. So doing those openings is a little more difficult, and there's only so much opening that we're allowed. It's one of the benefits if we sprinkle the entire building. Now that firewall goes away, and this wall, in fact, these doors into this corridor go away, this wall becomes all glass. So it's much better visibility in that case. That's not to say that we'll go one way or the other. That's something that will have to be made. Your second question?
The deferred.
Oh, yeah. So, in that 2.6, that includes all of the deferred things that we listed as deferred maintenance items.
But were you concerned that we're gonna say, well, we're gonna build this instead of not gonna do deferred? Not if I have anything to say about it. I mean, I can tell you that some of the air conditioners, the HVAC units we have were from 1986. When I built my last building and they were 89, I ripped them out and put them in there. They're not predictable. I stand underneath this crack Sunday, things fall in my hair. I'm really afraid that on Sunday I may not make it out of service. Really crashes in. So yeah, I think that was very specific, you know, that the whole flat roof needed to be done in this section.
The game plan is all of those things that are listed there, with the exception of the condensers for worship, will all be replaced and upgraded as part of the building program now.
I'm with John, because if it hits him, it hits me.
Yeah. And I'm taller than you, so it's gonna hit me first.
That's a blessing.
There's a few people who would agree with you probably. Oh, yes, right here. You have.
Hello, my name is Dick Udis, and happen to be in the excavating business, family business in 1923. My advice to you, sir, would be we start April 1st. We did nothing but commercial work with all the biggest contractors in the city of Milwaukee. We also have the soil testing laboratory, and I did a lot of work on the last edition. By the way, that's all fill out there. So you may want to talk to me about that too. I also put the sewer in out there, but here and there, working on the side with all these contractors, all these years, you don't start building until April 1st. Thank you.
I assume that storage area outside of Fellowship Hall is for the quilters. How much bigger is that going to be than what we have, and is it being shared again?
So I'll answer that question. I know that was going to
Why
come
are
up.
you running away?
I'm not running away. I'm gonna answer so they can see my beautiful face on TV. Yeah, you know, storage spaces are still, again, this is not architectural plans. There are things, you know, we're exactly how the bells, we have costumes that storage have always been a problem. We have quilting storage, all those kinds of props for the plays. Yeah, we're addressing all of those that are aware of. I guarantee that the architects have heard that. The building committee is Carrie's shaking her head. They probably spent a lot of time. Yeah, so I mean, there will be the space. There will be a lot more storage space. If you look at the plans, there's lots of storage in there. Plus, a lot of the rooms and some of like the youth room and the new educational spot, those will have cabinets and things built into them for some storage. That'll take some of that space. So yes, there will be more storage space. And the quilter is definitely on that list.
I have a question about the amount of space for adult literacy. Right now we have 1/3 of Luther, which is about 2 16 by 12 foot spaces, and it looks like we're down to 18 by 3. Could you address the shrinkage of that, please?
Yes, it actually, I'm learning you have to wait a minute for this.
Yeah. Just leave it on.
So right now, we have literacy office here. This wall is actually supposed to be a little bit farther so that we gain more space in that area. And this conference room is strategically located also to be convenient for that space to use for part of its programming. So that office space that's shown right now will actually be bigger. The conference room will be a little bit smaller. Right now, this conference and this conference are about the same size, and we don't need both of those spaces shown at that size. So the literacy office will actually get larger than it's currently shown to get closer to that size that we currently have now, and then you'll have direct access into the conference room, or convenient access, I should say, into the conference room, as well as then into programming spaces and the educational areas as well as needed.
Okay, again, storage is very important for access to open bookshelves.
Okay, great.
Thank you, John. Mike Brown, just a couple of things. One, obviously, first, thank you to everybody for just an incredible amount of ministry going into all this work. One, just a quick comment about sprinklers that I'm very confident your group has already discussed, which is there's another advantage to doing them is because it's a safety issue.
Right.
So certainly, as we look at that price tag, we talk about what is the state going to say. The answer may be, who cares what the state says? We wanna put them in, because we're gonna have to put them in anyway, and that way that part of the building's protected. The youth room, just an observation that I'd appreciate your comments on, and then one other, so I'll give you both of them and can remind you if you need to remind. On the youth room and the junior high, I'd be interested in the comments, because right now the junior high room's length to width ratio is 1:3, and there would be a way to orient that wall going north-south instead of east-west, where the
Windows.
ratio would be 1:2.
Right, we've done this way specifically for windows.
Yeah, I understand that, and I understand that's why it's where it is as well. But just a comment that may be rethought, because as I'm looking at that junior high room, that's gonna be very difficult to get a lot of flexible use out of with orientation. The other comment, and perhaps one that I think may be more compelling, is while I'm sure nobody's interested in the price tag going up, right now, we're going to build, by this plan, we're gonna build an exterior wall for the kitchen when we anticipate that, the new kitchen, when we anticipate going out all the way to the north end of the existing fellowship hall. So I'm very curious if the group looked at how much would it cost to rough in so that that exterior wall for both running the north-south and the east-west actually went the full length with the existing fellowship hall, even if that was only used for roughed-in storage, so that we don't have to rebuild it later, essentially not making use of that exterior wall, but then would be separating the kitchen and that new
I can
space.
see the wheels here turning. As for the youth room, the youth room was perhaps one of the more challenging. How do you take Luther and make it? I think we're looking at it. The thing to remember is the junior high youth room is mostly a classroom space. It would be used for the 7th and 8th grade Sunday school, and for other things it was labeled junior youth. Where the youth room is really more of a lounge for back. So that's part of it.
So for what it's worth, John, and take this with a grain of salt, I helped design the School of Pharmacy in Concordia, and I love the School of Pharmacy, and there was one thing that I say I don't like about it, and it's classroom that's that shape.
Yeah.
So that's why.
It certainly was a concern, but we wanted to try to get some windows so they don't feel like they're in a cave. Because right now the youth room is very cave. Well, but with a cavern running through it. You want to talk about the other space question?
Sure. I think that's certainly worthy of consideration. If I'm understanding what you were proposing, you essentially take this space, build it farther out, build in a section.
I think he's talking the other way.
That way.
Because it eventually would be, so when I spend money on that east-west wall that's on the north end, when eventually that's gonna be pushed out another 30 feet anyway.
Yeah, I think the committee can look at all of that. And yes, while that may have a cost implication now, one of the things that churches have to consider, because they're long-term building users, is the value of something relative to the upfront cost for the long term, because you will be here functioning as a congregation in 20, 30, 40 years.
Here,
Yeah, I have a question. Under the original master plan, we had an area that we wanted to set aside for wedding party preparations. Was there any thought on how that's going to be addressed in this current plan?
Yes, I talked to a lot of churches about bridegrooms. Bridegrooms come up all the time. It's not uncommon to see architects that don't work with a lot of churches provide bridegrooms right off of gathering spaces or right off of worship spaces. I've never been a bride, so I can't speak to the brides, but my thinking is this. Brides have large parties and have needs of toilet rooms and privacy. If I was going to set up this plan to service brides, I would not locate them in the area that's going to have the highest traffic before and after a wedding. I would put them in spaces where they have access to lots of toilet rooms. My thinking would be this room, or even this room, convenient to toilet rooms where you can shut off a corridor, keep the public out, and allow the bridal parties to prepare without having to greet people and be involved in, it used to be maybe you had a bride and 2 or 3 attendants. I've seen bridal parties that have 5 or 6 or 7 attendants. They need a lot of space, mothers of the bride, mothers of the groom. And if you want to keep the bride and groom separate, then you might consider the grooms using that nursery space or even perhaps in the meeting room or fellowship hall with toilet rooms and we tend to keep the brides less public and the grooms maybe not so concerned.
We currently throw the rooms in the east room with the large TV. And in fact, we can certainly do that.
My thinking is that the access and privacy of toilets are a bigger concern than proximity to the worship space. You only make that run to the worship space once, right at the time of the wedding, and then afterwards, getting back to the service area. But back and forth between toilet rooms and the need for privacy is really critical.
Just a quick question. How does the new kitchen size compare to the old kitchen size?
The new kitchen size is a little bit larger than the previous, but roughly about the same size. And it's not a size that is uncommon to worship facilities of your size. One of our next steps, so again, one of the big questions is, will the budget get approved with the new kitchen? We have talked to kitchen designers, and I don't know that we've specifically identified the designer that will work on your project yet, but bringing in a designer that knows how to lay out a kitchen and getting the kitchen shape perfected for the convenient and easy use. I like to cook. I've worked and owned kitchens that were big but not able to be used for cooking easily. And I've had kitchens that were sized and laid out so that the smaller space was more convenient for doing what you need to do. First critical step is bringing the kitchen designer on board and having them inform how the shape actually needs to be to really function the way you want it to function for your kitchen program.
Just for clarification, you say the size of the new kitchen is about the same size as the old kitchen. Are you saying that the new kitchen area plus the serving area is about the same size?
Just the kitchen. So your existing kitchen space is about 500 square feet. The new kitchen, just the kitchen, is 600. And that's a pretty typical size for church kitchens.
I'm a Handel Choir Director, so I have a question about the plan for the music/meeting room. In that I know often when plans are done, there's usually little drawings of what goes in the room, so you make sure you have space. So I'm wondering whether Handel thought was given to handbills utilizing that room so that, which is what I was hoping, because a lot of times there is some issues with the music or the worship center being used, so I don't know if that was part of it, because I have serious concerns about space.
And again, those specific layouts, we could have come today with everything exactly laid out where every closet and every storeroom and every shelf is going to be, but we have to pay them more money to do that. And so it's kind of a, how far do you go before that? Yeah, it is, and that's certainly the music area, that music room, how it's going to be used, because it also has to be dual purpose. And we can't really dedicate a room to be used 2 hours a week for the bells to practice, as nice as it would be. So we have to figure that out. So, it has been discussed, but those are things that as they go for the planning, they'll continue to work with the individual users of those homes.
I just want to say, we don't have to take down
for the praise band every week,
Right.
their equipment. I
Yeah.
would hope there'd be some thought to, so we don't always have to, schlep equipment and stuff around. Okay.
You don't wanna leave them just sitting back here all the time? Other questions? Okay. I feel like I'm playing Let's Make a Deal. I just wanna say that it is, we said an hour and 15 minutes, it is an hour and 15 minutes. Again, if you have additional questions or comments, those green sheets that are back here, emails, please let us know, talk to us afterwards, call us, as I know some people have to leave.
Appreciate the work of the council and the building committee. This is fantastic. 2006, 9 years.
I know.
I was on council back then.
So was I, for a long time.
So I wasn't expecting $1 million proposal, but I wasn't expecting a $2.6 million proposal. I thought we would be somewhere in between, with details on the financing as fresh as Thursday night, and talking about details, but not really seeing numbers, hearing $50,000 a year in mortgage increases. Is that before or after a mortgage reduction appeal?
That would be before a mortgage reduction appeal.
I'm just concerned about having to make this decision in 7 days. We've been kicking this around for 9 years, and the difference in my mind is $1 million more than what my expectations were. Just throwing that out on the table.
Can I answer that question?
Okay. I don't see one. And then.
So, I'm new here, I haven't been in the church that long, I've only been here a year, but to me, this is the way things work. This isn't really our voting for the approval of the plan, it's really our voting in the confidence of the leaders of the church. Because they've been at this, they've been working hard, they've been doing all this work for so long, and they're the ones that have scrutinized the plan, they're the ones that have more experience than us, that have confidence and faith that the $50,000 mortgage is okay. Pastor Paul's got a ton of experience with all of this. Like, they're the ones that really lay down the foundation and know that we can do this. So to me, yeah, $2.6 million seems ridiculous, but all the people that have been working at it for so long feel like this is the right way to go and feel like we can handle this as a congregation moving forward. And to me, it's more of a vote of confidence of the leaders than a vote of confidence in the building fund.
And I appreciate that. I mean, and Roger, I'm going to give it to you next, but I guess my answer to this, and if there's other council members who would like to address it as well, we were advised by the building committee on, these are the dates that if we're going to do this, we need to, if we don't want to delay, that we're going to do it. And so we put it in place so that we could make that decision in that timeline. I know, I was out of town until 11 o'clock last night. I was gone all last week. Not the way I like to prepare before, something that I've been working on personally for 6 years or something. So I understand that the timing is there, and that's the decision, if there's a lot of people that feel that way, we can have that discussion, I guess. But Roger?
I second what the gentleman ahead of me just said. I have a question about roof. To channel a former building committee chairman, we hate flat roofs. If you could comment on that, and also, is there a benefit to looking at solar, or is that probably a bit?
There was a time that flat roofs were built completely flat, back in frankly right here. We no longer build flat roofs. They always have pitch. We like to call them low slope rather than flat. And we have sections of the new construction that will be low slope, and we have some that are higher slope in the design right now. By interchanging both types of roof in that, we're able to get some natural light into the heart of the building addition through some clerestory windows over that low slope. There are other ways to do that, but I think they're often a little less successful. The design of the low slope roof is critical for how it functions. I have a Milwaukee bungalow in Milwaukee. I have ice dams on my southern exposure for a good chunk of the winter. There are problems with every type of roofing design. And the real question is, how do you anticipate dealing with those, and is the roof maintained? One of the advantages of the low slope roof is it actually drains water differently, and in my opinion, sometimes more effectively. You have to have the right membrane, and it has to be maintained correctly. The second part of that.
Solar?
Solar. There are things that we can potentially consider for sustainability of the building. Right now, the payback on solar is not where most congregations would like to be in order to undertake solar for electricity. It is possible to do solar with good return for helping with hot water and the heating of water. Gas prices right now are probably not helping that any. But I have in congregations that said we want to do as much as possible for sustainable design and foresee solar panels becoming a part of our project at some point in the future. And that's certainly possible to do, even if it's not cost effective right now.
Okay, question, someone had asked earlier if we could tell exactly how much of the $1 million pledge, or 900 or whatever it is, $1,000 pledge, we've taken in so far is $345,139. Some of that has gone out, and that's thank you, Lisa, for being able to pull that number so quickly. Yes, Ralph.
All right, Ralph Deluxe. I'd like to try to maybe bridge the last two questions that we had in our rounders, but Dan's and new member, was it Dan also?
Pat.
Pat, okay, Dan and Pat. Well, I agree with Pat's comment that, it is a vote and reliance on the people that have been working on it and so on. There is also a historical perspective here that I think Dan is alluding to, and I know that other members of the congregation have talked or asked me or shared their thoughts. And again, people have some more conservative nature with financing than others. But historically, it's hard to wrap my head around going to a $2.6 million project that entails ballpark $50,000 in additional mortgage costs, when I know how we've struggled to make our budgets the most recent years. And I know from working with, serving on a finance committee with Romy and others, there's quite a divergence in terms of comfort level on the council as you're working through that. I'm just wondering if you could share how the council got comfortable with it, because I think there are people in the congregation that still aren't comfortable with taking on that big of a chunk. Of an increase.
Yeah, I'll be honest, there are council members that are concerned about it. Have I lost a fair amount of sleep over this in the last couple of weeks? Have I wondered why in the world did I say that I would do this? Yeah, I mean, it's frightening. But I think the feeling of the majority of the council, at least, and it was a unanimous vote to bring it here to the congregation in this way, was that all of the advisors that we've talked to, from Mission Investment Fund to RSI, all just spent some time at the stewardship of the ELCA, and talking to other churches who have done this locally, was that this is not unusual. What's really unusual for our church is that we have an $83,000 mortgage existing. That's what makes us different currently. It's one of the things that's really odd, right? And so, as we looked at that, and we projected, and I had to project for the application, I had to project 6 years into the future of what our expenses and our income were going to be. Right off my big crystal ball. It was lots of fun. But I think, the council felt that it was there. We've gotten to this point. It congregation has pledged $1 million to this point. The money is coming in as expected to this point. That, you know, if we don't do this, you know, what the building committee, several of them have told me is, we either do this the way it is, or it's not worth doing. So, I mean, that's some of the recommendation and where we've come from. That answer your question? I mean, it's some of and some of it's a faith, you know, lots of praying about this. You know, as a business person who invests money and opens businesses, you know, you look at the facts, and even then sometimes faith comes into it. In this, there's some faith. Chris, first, amen.
Thank you. My name is Chris Lemoyne, and I was on the original strategic planning swamp team back in 2006. So again, it's nice to see the evolution of the plan and finally get to the point where we can kind of move ahead. Part of what I look at, and we talked even back then about the multi-generational effects of doing a major building project. And I myself have an MBA, and I'm looking at, you know, return on investment and enhancements to the quality of life. And as I see things, even though it's always a stretch, I feel very confident about how things are going, and certainly be in favor as we move ahead with things. I did have a question about the energy efficiency. You know, some buildings have that LEED certification, and obviously we're working with partial renovated space. We're never going to get to 100%. But how close are we to being like a LEED certified building in terms of a percentage? Are we 80% there, or do we have a ways to go in that regards?
I am a lead AP, and we have not done kind of a point calculation to find out how close you would be to that. One of the challenges with LEED for churches is it's hard. I mean, it's an expensive cost to get the certification with little benefit.
It looks nice to say you're LEED certified, but you could be all the energy efficiency and not be LEED certified.
So you can incorporate that with
Just
multiple
pay for that.
certification. What most businesses do the certification for is to get tax credits, grants, other things that they're able to get that churches very rarely are able to take advantage of. So it's pretty uncommon for a church to do the LEED certification. We can certainly incorporate things into the design. The question that most churches have is, what does that cost versus, because there is a cost from the design side of it as well, versus what we benefit from. All of the building envelope will be designed to current energy standards for the state of Wisconsin, which are certainly better than what you have in existing buildings now. And as we upgrade building systems, those will also be done in a way that's compliant with the current understanding, and will take advantage of whatever we can in free or passive sorts of improvements for sustainability.
I know we're trying to wrap up. Linda Borkenhagen. I'm really thrilled with what I'm seeing. I'm a huge supporter of the program and so on. I'm still bothered by needing to make a decision next week. I feel it's really rush for a $2.6 million project. Things like, do the bells, tables fit in that allocated space? What does it look like to reconfigure the wall for junior and high school youth? What does material acquisition look like for the adult literacy? Some things like that. What is security like at night? I get that the office staff can buzz somebody in. I think I have a bigger concern about how do we know that the building is empty at night with all of the activity that goes on. And so I'm sure there's an answer for that. I just feel like rushing into this for a decision for next week when I think there's going to be a lot of questions out there from people who can't be here, and myself included. It's worth waiting, even if it's a month, to be able to ask and have questions answered, and that's what I prefer to do.
So just as a point of notification, not commenting on your comment, but you know, to do it, we would have to push it back at least 2 weeks because of this little thing called Easter, but also because our Constitution requires us to give 2 weeks notice for any kind of voting meeting. So that from a timing standpoint. And the other question that's been asked is if you're not going to be here next year and you feel strongly one way or the other, can you, next week, next year, sorry. I'm glad you're all listening, I'm just testing. Can you put in a proxy vote? The answer is no, our Constitution does not allow that. If we want to do that, that's a 2-year process to change that. So, that's the answer. Yes.
Jim Mulholland, property chair, new property chair, and also in taking that role on, I wanted to be a liaison between the building committee and the council. What we have here is a good amount of work, is a good amount of work that's been going on for a long time. 2006, it's 9 years. This meeting here is for you to decide whether those 9 years worth of thought, dream, faith, prayer are going to come to fruition. Do you want this? If you want it, vote yes. Do you know if you're going to be able to pay for it? Where are we? Pastor Paul will tell you to have faith. I'm going to tell you the same thing. This plan is a good plan. It was designed for two phases. The initial phase here, and then the second phase, which would be worship and fellowship. Get your kitchen down. Well, first of all, decide whether you want to do this now. You want to do this now? Get it done. I don't know how much time you really need. There's 9 years. So, it's either yes or no. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Sorry, somebody first.
Hi, thank you. I just noticed that, it looks like we have 2 entrances to the church now, one of which has a canopy over it, the other one does not. And it seems like the coat area is all the way across on the other side from the entrance with the canopy, and you have to come all the way back to go to church. Has anybody looked at like the flow of people coming in and out and where people are gonna go? Is that hospitality space gonna be used? The fireplace looks like it's kind of off in the corner. I've seen churches with hospitality spaces, and there's not a lot of people in them. Sometimes, people just gather somewhere else. Have you, looked at that and determined how that's gonna happen?
So we have looked at traffic patterns through this space. One of the challenges, again, this is based on my 20 years of experience, which is based on, I learned a lot from people that came before me with respect to church design. Church growth experts, when I used to come to work with ELK congregations, Pat Dever from the Mission Investment Fund was always one of the first people in the door. Top of her list of things that the church believes result in church growth is an adequate sized place for gathering. Number 1 on her list. If you don't have that, it significantly hampers your growth as a congregation with the outreach of your ministries. The 1/3 to 1/2 is critical. I go one step farther and say it doesn't just matter how big the space is, kind of like the kitchen. You have to have enough space, but how it's laid out matters. Most churches design their gatherings, most architects that don't have a lot of familiarity with church design just work on square footage. Sometimes they design wide corridors. You have to have space in the church that people can actually get out of the path of travel, right? We typically take the shortest distance through a space. That's part of the reason we pulled the fireplace down in this corner, so people along the bright areas of the building could actually congregate during hospitality times, stop, have a cup of coffee, talk to the people that are either new or members of the congregation, and build community in that space. That's part of the reason we pulled all that off of the circulation path of travel. In regard to the need for the space, when I go back and talk to people that didn't have a gathering space and were concerned about the size of the space when it was in design, and you talk to them afterwards, they can't imagine how they ever got by as a congregation without that space. Pretty much unanimously. The big difference is, if the church is a dying congregation, no amount of gathering is going to turn that around without a significant change in the outlook and the outreach of the congregation. You are not a dying congregation. My thinking is, you provide that space. They go off.
Mine must be up.
You provide that space, you will thrive in it.
The other thing to look at, if you look at some of the elevations, you can see the different colored carpeting, which is done very specifically to help draw people in paths to places that they may need to go, like to Coats or past it, versus areas that are more, seen in a lot of hotels. Yeah, and Coats have been, Karen has made sure that the committee has been thinking about Coats.
And hallways.
Coats and hallways, and low chairs.
Yes.
And is any parent who has ever tried to drop off their child for Sunday school in the middle of coffee hour between services can tell you that is quite the challenge. I don't think us worrying about, filling that hospitality space is an issue. I think it's a great blessing that we have, I'm sorry, this is Darlene Rowling, I'm your president-elect. So it is a great blessing that we do have so many fabulous people here at Grace, and that we do have that desire to congregate and have fellowship, moving it out of our main entranceway so we can't get our kids off to Sunday school is one wonderful thing. Some of the concerns that we heard, I haven't been involved in this 9-year process. I started in January, so I'm seeing some of these figures just a little bit ahead of where you guys are seeing them as well for the first time. And I remember, the estimates, they were 1.5 to 2 million. I know we like to think, oh, I like the 1.5, that sounds great. But 2.6 isn't that far off from where we started with those estimates. If you look at what we brought into this plan, right, a lot of that deferred maintenance that we talk about getting rid of those residential heating units, yes, I said that, residential heating units that are in this church that failed again once this morning to heat our church for services, and bringing in commercial grade equipment to service this building, to fix our leaky roofs, right? That was all brought into that number. We're also talking about, moving things up from phase 2 because they make sense. So that's adding on to that number. And again, we started with 9 years of research into those. That 2.0, that 2 million number, that's very, very out of date at this point. There's inflation, costs have gone up. So the fact that we managed to bring in so much, including bringing this building up to code, to bringing in fire systems that will help us, keep us safe, keep our children safe, right? We came to Grace originally looking for that home church to start our family. Jeff and I didn't have any kids when we started. We were looking to have a home for our future children. What this plan does is it looks to the future of Grace. It's not just talking about the members that are here today, about the children that are here today in Sunday schools. We're talking about serving our community into the future, to bringing in more families and welcoming more Christians into our home for the future of Grace, not just today, right? So that's what these plans will do.
Are there other comments? Specific questions? Okay, Bob?
Clarification, John. At the meeting next week, will there be more financial information presented?
Yes, that is my sincere goal. As soon as I can get them, they'll be out. I don't know how we're going to distribute them, whether we'll send emails out, whether we'll post it. I'm a little nervous about posting financial stuff, but that may be the best. We will. Church Council's meeting Thursday night. I guarantee you we'll be discussing this. I hope to have more numbers on this to do this. Again, the numbers are being run. As soon as I get those numbers run, I will share them. I fully intend, my goal is, I'm not going to stand here and promise, because Lord knows what can happen between now and then, but that goal is to have that. The goal was to have that information prior to today. Mission Investment took an extra week because they were backed up. And so we didn't have an approval and an amount until literally Thursday night. So we had Friday, and I was traveling, unfortunately, the other person, Romy, was traveling, it got a little complicated. We were texting each other on airplanes trying to come up with a plan, literally. So, yes, that's the goal. Okay? All right, I don't see anybody else, but I appreciate everybody for your comments, your thoughts. Before, we're going to end with a prayer in a moment, but I would remember, please, notes, if you want to handwrite it out, bring it in, give it to the office, or myself, or Heidi, or Paul, and we'll get it to council. And we'll have those by Wednesday. We'll have answers. Email, please feel free. And we'll consider this. And if we hear a lot, one way or the other, our goal at this point, our plan is to still have a vote next week. If we get a ton of other people who don't feel that way, we'll certainly take it under advisement. I don't know where that would end up because we obviously haven't discussed it. So, Kristen, I'm sorry, I didn't see you standing there.
I was going to say that for insulating the door, that's going to be a very big help during the play, because then we will be able to talk without everyone else hearing us, because that's been a big problem.
Absolutely. All right. Paul, do you want to close in a word there?
And just once again, thanks to everyone who has put literally years and years and years into this. It's an exciting time, scary time for us as a congregation, but I pray the Lord will lead us. And again, trust your leadership. They've done an excellent job. I'll reiterate what John said. If you have any questions, please talk to us. Okay, we can't guarantee we'll have all the answers for all the questions before, on Wednesday or Thursday for you, but we will do everything we can to have every question answered to the best of our ability next week. We want this to be done in a forthright, open, honest, and Christ-filled fashion. So please understand that's where your leadership has been coming from all this time. So let's close the word. Heavenly Father, you lead us. You lead us in paths. We know you lead us sometimes in paths we're not quite so sure of. Sometimes that path is very scary, but you always lead us. And I thank you for this congregation of servants of Jesus Christ. I thank you for where you've led us these 50 years. And I pray you will continue to lead us, to guide us, to make us wise, to make us brave, so that 50 years from now, people will look back and say, thank you, everyone, in 2015. Thank you for what you've done to make this church the church it is today. All this we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you very much, everybody.